The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty blinds of a tense county courthouse in Jackson, Mississippi. The room was packed. Press, protesters, and police alike filled every bench, their faces tight with anticipation. On trial was Officer Rick Dalton, a white cop with a reputation as brutal as it was protected. Accused of beating an unarmed black teenager during a traffic stop, Dalton had become the face of a department under fire. But today, all eyes were on Kendra Miles, the poised, sharply dressed woman seated confidently at the witness stand. Kendra, in her early 30s, radiated a quiet authority. With deep brown eyes that seemed to scan through lies, she took her oath with calm certainty. She was listed on the docket as an independent consultant, called to analyze police procedures and accountability metrics, yet no one quite knew her background. Her resume was vague, her credentials impeccable but oddly classified. Across the room, Rick Dalton sat stiffly at the defense table. He was a thick-necked man in his 40s with a shaved head and a permanent sneer. He hated being questioned, hated more that a black woman was doing it. His hands clenched under the table as Kendra began to testify, calmly dismantling the department's internal report, citing inconsistencies in timestamps, altered body cam data, and witness intimidation efforts. The courtroom was gripped by her precision. Even the judge, a conservative appointee known for siding with law enforcement, looked momentarily uncertain. Kendra flipped through documents and digital evidence with the ease of someone used to pressure. What the public saw was a woman prepared, professional, and unintimidated by uniformed men who usually silence people like her. Dalton's face turned red as she continued. He whispered angrily to his attorney. The crowd murmured. The power in the room was shifting, and he could feel it. Finally, when Kendra calmly exposed a section of police body cam footage that had clearly been tampered with, highlighting edits down to the frame, Dalton lost control. He stood up and shouted, "You! People always twist the truth." The courtroom gasped. The judge banged his gavel, yelling for order. But Rick wasn't done. Fueled by rage and humiliation, he stormed toward the witness stand. Before the bailiff could intervene, he punched Kendra square in the face. The room erupted. Screams, phones flew into the air. Reporters leapt from their seats. The bailiff tackled Rick, dragging him back as he cursed and struggled. The judge ordered him detained for assault. Cameras clicked as officers swarmed the room. And Kendra? She didn't fall. She hadn't flinched. Blood ran from her split lip, but she stood tall. Slowly, she brought a hand to her mouth, wiped the blood away, and smiled not in mockery, but in measured defiance. Her eyes locked with Dalton's. In that look there was no fear, just quiet promise. The entire courtroom froze. Something about her presence so unshaken, so composed, unsettled even the most hardened officers in the room. People began whispering. Who is she? Dalton, restrained and breathing heavily, stared at her with disbelief. For the first time, he wasn't sure he was the most dangerous person in the room. And Kendra wasn't just a witness. She was the reckoning. The news cycle exploded within hours. Video footage of Officer Rick Dalton punching Kendra Miles in open court went viral. Talk shows debated what provoked him. Social media erupted, divided and loud. One side demanded Dalton be imprisoned for assault. The other claimed he had been baited. But the one person who remained silent was Kendra Miles, and that silence made her even more mysterious. The media tried to dig into her past, but ran into walls. Her name yielded no interviews, no hometown, no personal history. The only official record was her status as a private security consultant with expertise in criminal analytics. It didn't make sense. How could someone so composed, so unshakable under pressure, be just a consultant? Something didn't add up. Far from the noise, Kendra stepped out of a nondescript SUV and entered a secure facility 2 hours outside of Washington, D.C. Biometric scanners welcomed her. Inside, sleek halls and reinforced glass revealed the true story. Kendra Miles wasn't just a consultant. She was a covert CIA agent assigned to a Black Ops domestic surveillance unit known only as Division Omega. Her mission: to investigate internal corruption within U.S. law enforcement tied to illegal arms trafficking and unauthorized surveillance programs. She had been embedded in the Jackson PD inquiry for over 6 months, gathering intel under deep cover. Dalton hadn't just assaulted a witness, he had attacked a federal intelligence operative on active duty. Inside the facility, Kendra met with her handler, a quiet but sharp-eyed senior agent named Director Vega. He closed the blinds and tapped a folder on the table between them. "This just became official," Vega said grimly. "The agency has authorized full clearance. You're no longer just watching, you're engaging." Kendra reviewed new intel-encrypted messages from the Jackson PD commander's private server, connections to a Blackwater-style paramilitary group, and records of surveillance drones used illegally on civilians. It wasn't just police misconduct anymore. It was a covert domestic war, and Dalton was one of its attack dogs. "Rick Dalton's not just a thug," Kendra said quietly. "He's a trigger man for something bigger." Back in Jackson, the mayor's office scrambled to control the narrative. Local officials whispered that Kendra had no right to be on the witness stand. Some tried to scrub her testimony from public records. A few even began to suggest the punch had been staged to discredit the department. But none of it mattered, because Kendra wasn't playing by their rules anymore. Her authority now came from a different level. With CIA backing, she was cleared to intervene, investigate, and neutralize threats within the state apparatus. And Rick Dalton had become more than a violent cop. He was now classified as a national security risk. As night fell, Kendra stood alone on a rooftop outside the federal safe house overlooking the city skyline. Her lip was still swollen, but her eyes burned with purpose. She had operated in war zones, tracked enemies through jungles and deserts. But this battlefield was personal. This was her country. And this time, the enemy wasn't hiding in caves. They were wearing badges. By morning, the headlines had shifted. Where once there had been outrage over the assault in the courtroom, now there was doubt, spin, and smoke. Mainstream networks aired clips suggesting Kendra Miles had escalated the confrontation. Conservative pundits repeated the same talking point. "We don't know who this woman really is." Somehow, the story had gone from a violent officer punching a witness to questioning why the witness was there in the first place. Behind the scenes, the machinery of power had begun to turn. The Jackson Police Department issued a rushed press release stating that Dalton had acted under stress and that the incident was being reviewed internally. No mention was made of the physical assault or the clear video evidence. To make matters worse, the courtroom's main surveillance feed mysteriously malfunctioned, and official footage of the punch was declared incomplete. Kendra watched the damage control unfold like a chess game. She recognized the patterns: disinformation, distraction, and delay. This wasn't just about saving Rick Dalton. It was about protecting the web behind him. Dalton, brutish as he was a pawn. The system was treating him like a valuable piece because he knew too much and had done too much for them to cut him loose without consequences. She met again with Director Vega, reviewing what little support they could publicly offer. "You know what this is now," he told her. "It's not just police corruption, it's an embedded network. They're connected to a private security firm, Centricore Defense, ex-military contractors, off-book operations. They're funding and training rogue officers across multiple cities. Dalton's one of their test subjects. Kendra's mission shifted. Surveillance data had revealed that Dalton had communicated directly with Centricore liaisons in the weeks leading up to the court case. His court appearance hadn't just been about defending himself, it had been about testing the system's tolerance. How far could a corrupt officer go before the public or the law pushed back? Apparently, very far. Meanwhile, the city was cracking under the weight of pressure. Protesters marched outside the courthouse daily. The black community saw what was happening in real time, an attempt to erase accountability. But the more they raised their voices, the more the authorities closed ranks. Several civil rights lawyers suddenly pulled out of cases involving the Jackson PD. A few even left town altogether. Intimidation was in full swing. Kendra realized the assault in court hadn't silenced her. It had activated her. With clearance from the CIA, she began quietly pulling records, decrypting back-channel communications, and cross-referencing financial transactions. What she uncovered was chilling. Ghost funds funneled into local police departments under fake training programs, body cam tampering software developed by military tech labs, and a disturbing number of deaths marked as accidents in precincts. Tied to Centricore. The final straw came when a key witness in the Dalton case turned up dead, ruled a suicide despite multiple bruises and a missing phone. Kendra stood at the edge of a war won not fought with bullets or bombs, but with lies, leverage, and fear. But she wasn't afraid. They wanted to bury the truth. But she had a shovel of her own. Rick Dalton sat in his dimly lit garage, the flicker of a dirty overhead light casting shadows over his face. The rage hadn't left him since the courtroom. If anything, it had fermented, becoming sharper, colder. He had spent the last week watching the narrative shift, watching Kendra Miles go from unknown consultant to an untouchable figure protected by federal agents. And it infuriated him. "She humiliated me," he growled, staring at a crumpled newspaper article featuring Kendra's face. She was untouchable now, but Rick refused to be the villain in a story where she played the hero. He would not be remembered as the one who got taken down by a black woman, especially one he couldn't even scare. But Rick wasn't stupid. Beneath the anger, he understood something that made him dangerous. Kendra wasn't just a woman who got lucky. She was trained. Deadly, and not just in court. The precision with which she presented evidence, her refusal to react, the eerie calm after his punch, it had gnawed at him. That kind of control didn't come from civilian life. She wasn't who she claimed to be. And Rick had decided he would find out the truth and take her out quietly, permanently. He reached out to an old contact, Duke Brennan, a former military operative turned Centricore mercenary. Duke owed Rick favors from their shared days on the private security fringe, places where body counts weren't tracked and no one asked questions. Rick laid it out. Kendra Miles needed to disappear. She's protected, Duke warned. Feds, possibly more. I don't care, Rick replied coldly. She bleeds like the rest of them. The plan was simple in theory, brutal in execution. Duke would rig Kendra's government vehicle with a small, undetectable explosive. Device triggered by ignition. No noise, no trace. Just a headline the next morning. Witness dies in tragic vehicle explosion. But as Duke prepped the device, Rick tracked Kendra's movements. What he didn't know was that Kendra had already anticipated retaliation. When she left the safe house that night and entered the car, her sharp eyes caught a faint red glimmer. Under the steering column, she froze. Her instincts activated immediately. A silent alarm was triggered to her field team. She disarmed the bomb within seconds, snapping wires with the steady hands of someone trained in tactical engineering. And she left it there on purpose. An hour later, Rick received a package at his mailbox. Inside was the disarmed bomb, neatly packed in a clear case labeled "Try Again." Rick's hand shook. She knew. Not only had she survived, she was sending messages now. This wasn't just about legal payback. It had become psychological, but Rick didn't stop. He doubled down. He hired 2 local enforcers to tail her. They followed her to a federal satellite office, then disappeared. No one heard from them again. Every attempt to scare her only made Kendra more focused, more precise. Rick's world began to shrink. His militia friends started backing away. His police contacts stopped answering calls. He wasn't a hero anymore. He was a liability. And still, she hadn't retaliated fully. Not yet. But Rick could feel it. She was coming. And this time, she wouldn't just be defending herself. She'd be ending the game. The courthouse was supposed to be secure. After multiple threats, federal agents had locked down the building, installed scanners at every entrance, and tripled the number of marshals inside. Still, Rick Dalton found a way in, dressed in a stolen security uniform with a badge clipped to his chest and a stolen sidearm tucked under his jacket. He walked through the side employee entrance just after 9 a.m., his face half covered. His eyes burning. Today was the secret evidentiary hearing for the broader case against Centricor and the Jackson PD. Kendra Miles would be testifying behind closed doors. The courtroom was half empty, with just a handful of approved officials and 1 high-ranking DOJ observer. The goal was silence, safety, and secrecy. Rick had other plans. Inside, Kendra stood at the witness box, calm and clear. She outlined encrypted messages from Centricor executives, military-grade surveillance drones used illegally in American cities, and financial kickbacks routed to police departments like Jackson's. Every word she spoke tightened the noose around powerful necks. Then came the blast, a flash grenade thrown through the rear exit. Chaos erupted. Smoke flooded the room. Marshals drew weapons. People ducked under benches, and alarms screamed. Through the haze, Rick Dalton and 2 armed mercenaries stormed in. Their eyes locked on Kendra, but as the attackers moved forward, expecting panic and disarray, they saw something they weren't prepared for. Kendra Miles didn't move. She stood. Still, calm, focused. In that split second of confusion, she activated her Edge Project sentience, a classified neural enhancement developed by the CIA for only a handful of elite agents. It unlocked heightened reflexes, rapid processing, and predictive combat engagement. Time slowed down. Kendra's eyes narrowed. Her pulse slowed. Her mind raced through a dozen outcomes, calculating every movement before it happened. The mercenary on her right raised his weapon. She was already moving. She dodged left, swept a table leg into his knees, and brought her elbow across his jaw in one fluid motion. The man collapsed. The second attacker charged. Kendra reached behind her and pulled a steel pen from the clerk's desk. She threw it hard and precise. It hit the man in the neck. He staggered, fell. Rick was all that remained. He stepped toward her, shaking with fury and disbelief. "What the hell are you?" he snarled, pulling his pistol. "I'm what you were never trained to handle," Kendra said coldly. He fired. She sidestepped before he pulled the trigger, already anticipating the shot. She closed the distance in seconds, disarming him with a fluid wrist lock and spinning him to the ground. His face hit the marble floor. Blood pooled beneath him. The courtroom fell silent. Smoke cleared. Marshals secured the area. Officials stared at Kendra in awe. What she had done was impossible by ordinary standards. But she wasn't ordinary. She stood over Rick's groaning body. For the first time, he looked afraid. Not because she'd beaten him, but because now he finally understood. She wasn't some mouthy civilian or uppity witness. She was a weapon. Trained, precise, unstoppable. And he had picked a fight with the wrong one. Rick Dalton sat alone in a reinforced federal detention cell, stripped of his badge, his uniform, and the bravado that once shielded him. His face was bruised from the courthouse takedown, his wrists still sore from the restraints. He had been declared a national security threat, held without bail, and placed on a federal watch list. The very institution, he thought, would protect him had cut him loose. The fallout had been seismic. Video from the courthouse. Assault footage of Kendra taking down 3 armed men with inhuman precision had been leaked by an anonymous source. The public now knew the truth. Kendra Miles was not just a consultant. She was an elite CIA operative who had risked her life to expose a dangerous domestic network. Social media exploded. News outlets scrambled to explain the origins of a woman who had, for months, operated right under their noses. Though Kendra's official identity remained classified, her actions were now part of the public record. And her message had been loud and clear. Corruption would be rooted out, no matter how deep it ran. Inside the halls of power, her testimony led to a sweeping internal investigation. Multiple Jackson PD officers resigned or were indicted. CentriCorps. Defense, the shadowy private contractor funding and training rogue police units, had its government contracts suspended. Bank records and encrypted communications linked CentriCorps executives to illegal surveillance, civilian harassment, and undeclared weapons caches in multiple U.S. cities. Kendra watched from afar as the house of cards began to collapse. She was back at a secure CIA facility now, recovering from the operation. Her lip had healed, but her mission was not done. She stood in a debriefing room with Director Vega, who placed a thick folder on the table. "This started in Jackson," he said. "But it's national now. You opened a door we can't close." "I didn't come here to close doors," Kendra replied. "I came to burn down the ones hiding the rot." Vega nodded. She'd be reassigned soon to lead a new initiative, designed to identify and neutralize rogue operators inside law enforcement and private military alliances. Quietly, off the books. Exactly how she liked it. But before that, Kendra had one final stop. She arrived at the federal penitentiary unannounced, escorted through levels of security until she stood outside Rick Dalton's cell. He looked up as she approached, his bravado gone, replaced by a hollow kind of dread. "You came to gloat?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Kendra didn't answer right away. She stared at him through the glass, watching the man who once thought his badge made him invincible now reduced to nothing. "No," she said at last. "I came so you'd understand something." Rick leaned forward, trying to mask his fear. "What?" She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I'm what you fear the most," she said. "Justice with power. The kind you can't threaten. Can't punch, can't bury." Rick's eyes dropped. Kendra turned and walked away. She didn't need applause. She didn't need recognition. The mission had never been about fame. It was about balance, accountability, and exposure. And as she stepped into the sunlight beyond the prison walls, a quiet smile crossed her face. There were more battles ahead. But today, justice had won.